Hey, welcome to Art Pays Me. Today we have Chanelle Jefferson. So Chanelle is a person I've been following a while on Instagram. I like to keep tabs on artists doing interesting work in Nova Scotia and beyond. And just ironically or interestingly enough, I guess, we just kind of cross paths in this digital world. And anyway, I'm happy to finally get to talk to you and can know a little bit more about you. So, Chanelle, welcome.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here and looking forward to speaking with you today.
Cool. So, if you could tell us what your creative practice actually is for people who don't know, and what your medium or mediums of choice are.
Yeah, so I am a mixed media artist. I'm a drawer first and a storyteller as well, definitely within my work. And then I am a certified practitioner. And I draw mainly on canvas, but always drawing blind contour is my method of choice. I use it as a way of meditation and just a way to deeply connect to the subject that I'm drawing.
Cool. When you say practitioner, certified practitioner, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I am able to help people support or help people move through things and support them through things such as grief or one-on-one counseling. And there's a story as to how it's connected to my art, but it definitely deeply affects everything that I do as an artist. But I was an artist first and then got that training afterwards.
Has grief in some way impacted what your subject matter is in art to some degree too?
It's interesting because the project that you're referring to, the grief project and my own grief, is definitely something newer in my work, but it definitely has always connected back to nature, and nature has always been the main inspiration within my work and everything that I do.
Interesting, because yeah, I was going to ask you, a lot of the stuff I've seen like seems to be important to you to be out in nature. Like I've seen you create work while you're like on a boat, and I'm like, do you really need that? But honestly, yeah. What is that? What's that about?
Yeah, so drawing blind contour actually means that I draw from my subject every single time I draw. I actually don't draw from imagination. If you were to ask me to draw a house, it would look like a stick figure house from my mind. Like it just doesn't happen. So I either have the choice of drawing from photograph or putting myself in situations where I can connect with that subject and actually see it in real life. And when I have that opportunity, I definitely prefer to see it in real life. It definitely impacts the drawing and what it looks like, as well as just the depth that's in the drawing. So I often do put myself in situations in nature. Sometimes it's freezing or it's raining, and next to the ocean, many different places, just to be more connected to my subject on a deeper level.
Interesting. So if, say, the paper or whatever it is you're working on gets damaged by the rain or whatever, does that just naturally become part of the artwork?
Yeah, so I draw on unprimed canvas. So it's actually got that color that's more nature than a white canvas. And then usually the edges are what get quite dirty, and we always frame and clean them up at the end and everything. But
Mm.
it just becomes part of the painting, or I add paint over it, and it just kind of evolves, becomes part of the piece.
Okay, cool. And you're based in the South Shore right now?
Yeah, so my studio is located in Lunenburg, and I live about 45 minutes away in a place called West Clifford that's just really deep in the woods.
Okay. And do you grow up in Nova Scotia?
I did, yes. I grew up in the Lunenburg area and went through school there. I spent some time in Alberta as well, and then actually attended Concordia University for Fine Arts in Montreal. So I lived there for 5 years and moved home when they sent us home through COVID, and I finished online.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you're a COVID baby artist. Okay.
I am, yes.
That was so I was on the NASCAD board of governors at that time, and one of the challenges they talked about was the studio situation for artists. How was that for you?
I was really lucky because it was in my 5th year that
Uh,
it happened. I was in my last year, so most of the things that I was doing weren't studio based. I had done most of my studio classes, but I couldn't imagine. My advice to artists at that time was to just wait a little and see what had happened, because it's definitely not the same experience. I was lucky enough to just mainly have electives left, so
it's such an interesting time too, because when you say that, wait, I remember thinking, man, we're never gonna be in a studio again.
yeah, same. I I had the feeling too, and I'm glad that I did finish over waiting to finish, but it's just it was an interesting time to be going to art school for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, when you were a kid, did you always think that this is what you were going to be doing?
I was always a creative kid. I, for some reason, had this drive to be an entrepreneur since I was like 8 years old. I don't know. I started a wrapping paper business where I would like
Nice.
make my family come over and pay me to wrap their Christmas presents. And I sold jewelry, and just like I was always creating something, but I also still had this passion to really just make my own money and see what I could make possible. I was also fired from pretty much every job I worked growing up. I was definitely meant to be an entrepreneur. So there's been some signs growing up that made me realize that this is what I was supposed to do for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. So I like that we don't always get this overlap where folks are both determined to be artists, but also have that hustle and that drive and that like entrepreneurial spirit that come together. That's a nice blend of things that doesn't always necessarily happen.
Yeah, and I think that in art school, it was really focused on building my art, and it was my responsibility to make sure I had that drive and that passion to figure the business part out. I've invested a lot of money and time into learning business because I see how important it is. Like art is a business. When you want to be a full-time artist, you really have to want to learn that side of it, and it's not something that's taught in a lot of art schools. So I do see many artists struggle with that side as well, and I think it is something that we have to learn to find things. We don't always have to do the things in business that we don't like to do, but
Yeah,
still find the parts that we do like to do.
right. I I have a question. Now, this is something that I've been thinking about in terms of my work and how to sort of stay authentic to what I want to do. And it's a fine line. I don't know if there's a perfect solution for it, because at the end of the day, we all have to pay bills. So I guess I wonder, are you the type that caters your work to a market, or are you the person that knows what you do and goes and tries to find the market that wants what you do? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that question because it's interesting. I have done my own experiment with this, and I find anytime I make something with the purpose of making money, it never sells. Uh, it's only when I make it from here, and I think that's something that we learn in business too. Is you can sell anything. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't even have to, it could be a product of any kind, but it all comes down to how you speak about it and how your messaging about the product. Can people understand, and are you selling it, or are you just kind of putting it out into the world and saying, here it is? So I do definitely always come from the heart. I've learned the hard way. When I do things for money, it just doesn't work out. But it's been a learning experience to articulate and sell what is coming from my heart.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I've fallen in this too, and it's sometimes frustrating to talk to people who aren't artists, but they appreciate what we do, because sometimes they'll say, hey, if you put that on a shirt, I know that would sell, or if you
Mm,
made this, I know that would sell. And there's always that temptation, and a couple times I've done it, and it never works.
no, yeah,
Never
it's
works.
interesting. It doesn't. It's been my experience too.
It's like I'd rather just, and it's sad to say, but it's like I'd almost rather fail doing the thing that
Mhm.
I feel invested in than just chasing something because other.
Yeah, for years I was told that a way to make money as an artist in Nova Scotia was to do the farmers markets, and I drug my stuff around, and I wasn't making the art that I'm making now. That evolved quite later in my practice when I discovered how to paint from what was inside of me, but I was painting things that I thought would sell. I was painting tourist locations throughout Nova Scotia, and I was dragging them to all of the farmers markets, and it was not something that I liked doing. It didn't fulfill me at all. It was dreadful for me. I'm very introverted, and it never worked. Like I never covered the cost of my table, but it's what I thought I was supposed to do as an artist in Nova Scotia.
Oh, now we're talking. Now we're talking. Oh, because I've been trying to convince myself lately to get out of the house more and do more things like that. I don't, but same, I don't feel comfortable in those
Mhm.
spaces. And I don't necessarily think that my work is right for those spaces either.
Yeah.
And, but I'm curious, how is it that you do find clients for your work then?
Yeah, so now a lot of my clients are online. I do a lot of my work online, and interior designers throughout Canada and the US. And there are a few different ways that I work on bringing new clients in, but also building relationships with them is really important to me. Um, I definitely don't do any of the farmers markets or anything like that anymore. We are exploring Art Project Toronto this year for the first time.
Nice.
So we'll see how that goes and see how I hold up during it. But I think me finding my clients is also learning how to speak to them, but also where they hang out. I think that's something that we don't think about as artists, because oftentimes we think, well, my art would speak to anybody. And if we speak to everybody, then we often speak to nobody. And the truth is a lot of people aren't going to like your stuff, and that's okay. But those people are out there. It's just looking at, for me personally, my clients love going to the spa. They love doing yoga. Like I've gotten to know my specific client really well, and I have a lot of clients from wineries or even owners of wineries. And so I know now to spend more of my time at, maybe they're not even events at those places, but investing more of my time and resources into meeting those people. So I think a question artists really need to ask is, who are the people who buy my work, and where do they spend most of their time?
Listen to that one. Write that one down, folks. That's great advice. And that's actually something that I picked up quite a bit myself too. It's man, you gotta find them, because this whole spray and pray thing, it really doesn't work, especially, if you don't if you want to make a living at this, uh,
Mhm.
you want to be able to make the money back that you've invested into your expenses and everything else, and you want to feel good about what you're making as well,
Yeah.
to you keep doing it.
Yeah. And so it's sustainable, because doing
Yes.
something you hate is not.
No, no. So do you have any influences for your work? Like, arts
Mm.
doesn't even necessarily have to be visual arts.
I think the two biggest visual artists that have impacted my career and my practice would be MacKay-Lyons. He's the one who teaches blind contour. He has a great book on blind contour that I studied in university. And then Egon Schiele. I remember being in Vienna for the first time and seeing his work in person, and it heavily influenced my work in showing me that line work is enough. It doesn't have to be realistic, and also that it's okay for your art to be weird. Like, it's okay for your art to have 6 fingers. And yes, my work is beautiful, but when we look really closely at it, there are, sometimes there's an extra toe, or things don't add up. And to me, those are the favorite parts of my work. So Egon Schiele had a huge influence. Mentors for me, my business mentor currently is James Wedmore. So he's been really supportive in helping me grow my business. And then Mandy Morris is also a huge influence on me. I've done a lot of work in learning with and through her. She actually is the one who I did a lot of my certification with. So she's a lovely person as well.
Nice. So, like, thinking about your creative process with sound, I was going to ask you about music, but when you're out in nature, I'm guessing you might not be necessarily listening to music.
I don't, and it's interesting because when I'm in the studio, actually one of my favorite albums to play through is Ben Howard. Is the Every Kingdom is the album, and I think the reason why is because a lot of those nature sounds are in there for me, and it's he includes a lot of the rain on tin, or just the birds and so many different pieces of nature. And for me, that's what I love listening to in the studio.
Nice. Are you currently represented by a gallery?
I'm not. No. Well, one of the interior designers I work with, they actually own their own gallery beside their interior design business that helps them place artwork with clients. But that's the only gallery, Allison Mill & Co. in Toronto. That's the only gallery that I've worked with. I actually haven't worked with many or any galleries in my career.
Is that something you're interested in?
Not really. I think it's something that I was interested in. Again, I kind of thought that's how, people will sell my work for me and it'll be easier. And in some cases that may be, but I really wanted to learn how to sell it myself and take back that agency, and also the amounts that like the percentage. When I work with an interior designer, the percentage ranges from like 15 to 20% commission, which feels good for me.
Yeah.
But the 50 to 60% has never felt good for me. So I don't typically tend to work with a gallery. If it were a dream gallery, then maybe I would change my mind. But
so that kind of like leans into my next question in terms of establishing pricing, because and along those lines, do you pay much attention to, say, the global art market, or is that something you're not even conscious of?
It's really not, to be honest. It's not something I take into consideration. Maybe at the beginning, when looking at a few different artists when I was placing or pricing my work. But I also find that, maybe we shouldn't go off of other people's pricing. And it's a really strange thing, because then we get into, well, you haven't been an artist for very long, your pricing shouldn't be as much. I call bullshit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
let it fly. It's all good.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. And so that's been something that has been really interesting for me. I'm fairly young. I've been working as an artist for a while, but only painting on canvas for 3 or 4 years. And so a lot of people do ask me about my pricing and where it comes from. I'm sure many artists know about the square inch formula, which is also not something I tend to use. I didn't use any formula until I started working commercially and with interior designers, because I realized then I kind of had to create a little more consistency working with them, so they knew what to expect. And that's when I took it upon myself to basically build my own formula that considers a lot of things, how much time we're spending on the art, of course, our supplies, but also I think the biggest mistake that I see artists make when pricing their work is they forget to consider what value or what your artwork is a service. It's bringing something to somebody, and they forget to consider what it does for other people in pricing it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is
How do
true.
you, how do you find most people commonly price their work that you speak with?
It's all over the place, and it's a frustrating thing. I think partly, I think schools should probably help more in
Mm,
guiding students through that. But then there's also just a lot of weird stuff socially that, like, I mean, the whole reason I started this art pays me thing is part of it, and I struggle with it myself. I found myself waffling back and forth, lowering my prices, increasing them, lowering them again, increasing them again, because and it ultimately comes down to I'm not finding the right people for my
mhm.
work, because you're at that farmer's market and you're talking to somebody and they're like making you feel like the worst capitalist in the world because you're trying to like make money off
Mhm.
of your art, and it's just like, yo, I put my heart and soul into this. So $1,000 may seem like it's incredibly expensive to you, but for me, I could charge more. So
Yeah, I think you're right. It definitely comes down to finding that right client. If your ideal client is someone who's at the farmer's market, then maybe your prices are different, if that is your ideal client. But I've also been in this situation because of that, of not knowing my ideal client, of like where people tell me, how dare you charge $1,000 for this? Or I've been in a situation with a designer that's like, you know, we think that we can tack on another 5 grand to this price because this is the client and we're comfortable with doing that. And I was like, okay, great. So it also comes down to how we're selling our work, and I think sometimes we put too much pressure on price, because if we do know how to speak to those clients and we do know how to message and sell our stuff, ultimately the price doesn't matter as much as we think it does. And that's just been my experience, in selling large scale commission pieces. If I tell a client a painting's $15,000 or I tell them 20 off, like ultimately it doesn't make a difference. It's
right.
really just comes down to who you're speaking to and what the work is providing for them, and if you're able to articulate that value in your work.
Yeah. So, like, I'm glad you mentioned that. Can you walk us through your commission process?
Yeah, so it if a commission is coming from a interior designer, it's a slightly different, because we just meet with the interior designer, and if we have the option to meet with the client, then great, but sometimes we don't always. So when I receive a commission request, they actually receive a form from me to fill out that basically asks them the most important questions for me, which are: what energy are you wanting to bring into your space, or what do you want this artwork to do for the space, the pieces of nature that speak to them, the colors, and then the past pieces of mine that resonate to them, so I can get an idea of what pieces of my work speak to them. And then from there, it's pretty hands off. I have a really specific contract that basically says that they're trusting me in the process, and it, you know, I don't share in progress photos. For some interior designers, we may have to, depending on the space and the scale of the work. That's where I have some wiggle room and things. But I typically don't share in progress photos. As an artist, there's always that time where you're like, this is the shittiest thing I've ever made. And I don't know if it's going to work. It always does, but there's always that
Yeah.
moment. You don't want anyone else to see that. You don't need anyone's
Because they're
critique
like,
during.
what?
Yeah. So there's that, and I'm just really clear that I do my best to convey their story or their message onto the canvas. And I haven't had any negative experiences with it so far. Most people are really respectful of the contract and the process. So it's been really great to know that I don't have, because a lot of artists find that people will overstep or ask them to add things in, and I do have a face-to-face call with them as well, and just
Mhm.
I have a really good onboarding process to ensure that the end result is what they would like to see.
Yeah. I mean, I have to hand it to you. I looked at your website and you have a level of professionalism with the way you describe things that's really impressive. And
Thank you.
people know what they're going to get. And it's that's a huge thing for making someone feel comfortable with an investment that they're making.
Yeah, building trust is super important in the entire process, and that's something that I do my best to convey. So I'm glad that comes through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it, I'm like, damn, I gotta step up.
Aw, well, thank you. A lot of love and time went into that website.
I gotta fix some things. Oh man. So tell me about the grief project.
I love being able to create experiences off of my work and immerse people in the work more. So the Grief Project is an opportunity for people to submit a story of their grief.
Hmm.
And I go through with basically a selection process. And if I feel that I can create a painting from it, and then I will create the artwork. And they come to an event in Nova Scotia, or we do a video release, but we've actually had people fly in from like Chicago and Alberta. It's been wild to come to the event to see the reveal of their painting, and then they have the option to purchase it.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Are you worried that the political situation right now is going to impact your American clientele relationship?
It actually hasn't been something that has come up for me. I deal mainly, my American clients are dealt with through designers,
Okay.
and then people who purchase directly from me are typically Canadian when I look at our sales.
Cool. So
Yeah.
what would you consider is a challenge you faced in your business?
Oh dear. I think there are many challenges. I think at the very beginning, it was being willing to admit that I had perhaps maybe had clung to my beliefs a little too hard, and that the things that I thought were true might not necessarily be true, like not needing to attend all of the farmers markets to make money. And so that was a big challenge, limiting beliefs. And I think at this point, when I look at the things that hold me back or any challenges I receive, they're mainly my own mind at this point in my career. Yeah, I'd say the biggest are just like if I bump up against a limiting belief or things that I feel like don't work. There were many challenges along the way, though. There were challenges of not having enough cash flow. There were challenges of, we live in a small community and small town. People often had their things to say about how I was doing my work or pricing my work. And I'm not saying that I don't experience problems anymore. I've just gotten a little bit better at handling them and knowing that there's always if there's a problem, there's always going to be a solution for it. And just kind of working to find the solution with more ease and less panic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like that's interesting you say that because yeah, you're young, you're based in a small town, but yet you're finding ways to sustain your art practice. And a lot of people would tell you that's impossible.
It is something that I have been told many times wouldn't work. But I think right now, I love where I live. I'm really drawn to being close to the ocean. And I also, I live deeply in the woods. I have no access to internet. I don't have a TV. And I do have running water. I still live on the grid, but I live my life. I have 5 chickens and a dog. That's the way that I want to live right now, and that may change, but I want people to know that it doesn't actually depend on where in the world you are or how you live your life, and that it's still possible no matter where you are.
I actually question though, do you find that you travel more now that you're established like this?
Yes, I do travel more. for myself and for work. I always try to tack on personal time at the end of any work trip, but I'm not traveling like every month. I did that for a while and then I was like, okay, I don't want to do this. I take back my wish. No way. But every few months I'll make a trip. I travel to Toronto quite often. I work with
Nice.
designers there. And I like Arizona next month, but not too often. So Toronto and Arizona right now are the only travel that I have happening.
And you did an artist residency in Lunenburg?
Yeah, in Lunenburg. I think, the time is weird now, but I think it was 2 years ago. And then a show in Vancouver last May that I did.
Nice. Zoe Pollack?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm a fan. Nice,
Yes,
nice.
she has been a beautiful mentor for me and actually went to Concordia quite a few years before me, but she's definitely led me when I have felt lost.
It's always great to have folks like that in your corner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you love nature.
Yes.
So this might be a silly question, but I'll ask it anyway. What do you do for fun?
Besides nature, this is a weird one that people might not actually know about me, but I love watching hockey.
Okay.
My boyfriend coaches a high school hockey team that I've been heavily invested in for the past 3 years. So I love watching hockey on the weekends, and I also have a dog that I love doing agility with, which is really funny. So I read a lot. I'm a pretty weird person, but I think that's to be expected as a creative. I do love to travel. I love to eat. Anytime I travel personally, it's mainly like, where can I go to eat? And like, what place is the best food right now for me? So.
Absolutely. Nice. So if there's one piece of advice you would give an aspiring artist, what would that be?
To surround yourself with people who are living a version of the life you'd like to live or have achieved things that you want to have. I think we underestimate the power of our environment. It is so important. It's been a huge impact on my growth and just making sure that the people who, you're the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And it's really wild to look at when we really consider where we're putting our time and even the environments that we put ourselves in. Being from a small town, sometimes it's hard to access those environments. So I have invested in online spaces, and there's always ways for you to connect with those people. And then the second most of all would be to learn about business.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what? Huge ones, because like community is something I definitely underestimated when I started out, for sure. And building relationships has been so big for me.
Yeah.
Like social media basically changed my practice in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I can imagine. And do you find that most of the relationships or the communities that you're in are local or in other parts of the world?
Definitely local more lately, but started out for sure other parts of the world, because it's just there are different ways of thinking, and I'm like, oh, there's another weirdo just like me somewhere else, you know? So like that's the other thing, like with this like kind of war we have with the States, in some ways it sucks for me in a lot of ways, because a lot of my community is away. So I'm like, I still wanna connect and collaborate with these folks, because in some ways they bring me what I need from my creative soul. But I've also created an incredible network here that this podcast and other things I've done have opened up and exposed me to, that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. So yeah, I've been building up my local creative circle, which feels great. And amplifying them has been like you, like another Nova Scotia artist who's doing incredible things. Like
Thank
I
you.
like to project that out to the folks that listen to me, like outside of Nova Scotia. So
Yeah, you've done an incredible amount of episodes with this podcast, which is really cool. It's amazing to see. I'm sure a lot of relationships have come from that as well.
yeah, it's so weird, this thing. Uh, I don't know. I'm sure, like, I'm on the Canadian Art Foundation board right now, and I'm pretty sure it probably wouldn't have happened without the
Yeah,
podcast in some capacity.
well, yeah, following your intuition's greatly important for sure. All the little nudges.
Yeah, all those things people tell you don't make sense, or why are you doing that? It's not gonna pay you, or blah blah blah. If it feels good, do it. If it
Mhm.
doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah, I've had many of those people in my life as well. And like even my own guidance counselor growing up, anytime I would go into her like little class, she would always ask, have you changed your mind yet about going to art school?
Jesus.
Holy shit, okay. Yeah.
Wow.
There's been a lot of people like that in my life, and I think being an entrepreneur is one of the most vulnerable things you can do. As Brene Brown says, you're putting yourself in the arena for every single person to have a judgment or an opinion on what it is you're doing, and there will be many people along the way. But I think an important thing to notice too is like the people who say those things aren't in the arena doing the work. It's never the person that you look up to that'll look down and be like, you shouldn't do that, or like that's not gonna work, and bad talking what you're doing. It's always the people who aren't. And so that's
Mhm.
been wildly interesting for me living here as well.
Yeah, yeah, folks. Actually, that's a key. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's a big one for me too. It's those people that a lot of times I'm like, I'm a fan of what you do, and they're like, no, what you're doing is incredible. I love that. And it's like, oh, all this time I've been listening to other people tell me that I shouldn't be doing blah blah. When I respect this person and they think I'm doing something interesting, eh,
Yeah,
eh,
it's wild.
yeah.
It's had a big impact on me, especially realizing that I'm definitely more aware of who I take advice and let get to my heart.
Yes, yes. So if there's something you want to promote coming forward, or something you want
Hmm.
people to look out for, or how do they find you, your website, your
Yeah,
social media, all that stuff,
you
shoot
can
it.
find me on my website for sure. I love connecting with people on Instagram. Coming up, I'm really looking forward to just commission. I love large scale work, so more commissions. And of course, the Toronto Art Project, we will be in Toronto in May. And I do host a yearly retreat. It's sold out this year for May, but perhaps next May.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, Chanelle, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here, and also, well, yeah, I'd love to stay connected and see all of the amazing things you continue to do.